Hello everyone. This is a video lesson of the chapter Coping with Personal Emergency Situations of Unit 4 Disaster Management. In this chapter, we also have to study an excerpt from the novel Patna Blues written by Abdullah Khan. This is Abdullah Khan, and this is the cover of his work, Patna Blues. When faced with a personal crisis, it is common to experience very strong emotional reactions, and as a result of this, the individual feels lost and won't be in a position to deal with the situation. So, it is important to regain your composure when you are faced with a personal crisis. You can become emotional by what is going on, and as a result you may be at a loss as to what to do. You may be confused, so it is important that you gain composure. This can interfere with the usual ability of a person to manage situations and can cause considerable distress. People who have experienced a disaster or personal crisis have found that they suffer from a variety of upsetting and distressful reactions. So, there are people who have experienced disasters and personal loss in their lives, and some of them are traumatized. Some of them know whenever the memory of a similar incident, whenever they come across a similar incident, the old memories, they remember all those things happened in their personal lives, and thus they are traumatized. People have a tendency to keep reliving the actual incident, having nightmares, panicky feelings that the situation will repeat, feeling depressed, feeling guilty, irritated, and angry. So all these are the traumatic effects of the memory of the incidents that they had to face in their personal lives. So a traumatized person will always be afraid, will be afraid that the situation will happen, the event will happen again. They will feel perpetually depressed. They might feel guilty for what happened. They'll obviously feel irritated and angry. Preparedness can assist us to manage personal crises and emergency situations. Learning how to handle a medical situation is important. So if you can learn to handle and administer first aid and uh, emergency procedures, then you might be able to handle personal medical crises. Learning how to handle a medical situation is important. Learning how to this can be done by getting first aid training at the nearby health center. It is common for people to think that they won't have to face an emergency situation. So that is what all of us think. Okay, we see such situations in the newspaper, in news, and then in cinema, and then we think to ourselves that oh, none of this is going to happen in my life. So that is not true. Something like this may happen in our lives as well. We have to understand that a disaster can occur anytime. A house should be equipped to deal with an emergency situation. So everyone should have that knowledge regarding how to deal with an emergency situation. Cash reserves and proper insurance coverage will take care of the financial part of a medical emergency. So, handling a medical emergency with respect to finance, you may have to spend a lot of money in the hospital. See, that can be dealt with later. Firstly, the person has to be alive. You should know how to keep a person alive, and only after that does the situation regarding finance we need to look at, or we need to take care of the financial processes later. So that if you have a health insurance, then your finances regarding medical emergencies will be taken care of by the insurance company. The following extract from Abdullah Khan's Patna Blues shows how the protagonist Arif Khan, a teenager, deals with two crisis situations: a medical emergency and a riot situation. So here, the protagonist, the person about whom the novel uh, his name is Arif Khan. Is a boy, and he's a boy who's obsessed with cracking the civil services examination. And this is only part of the novel. And in this excerpt, we have Arif Khan facing a medical emergency as well as a riot situation. So let's look at the excerpt. 10 minutes later, Arif sat on a green patch of grass in Nehru Park with a blue diary and the Diwani Momin lying next to him. So it starts with 10 minutes later. As I told you, this is only part of the novel Patna Blues. So we don't know what happened 10 minutes before. So that's all right. We need to learn only the small part from the big novel. So he was sitting in Nehru Park. So this takes place, as it is obvious from the title, takes place in Patna, Bihar. And he was there sitting with a blue diary and Diwani Momim. It is the work of Momin Khan Momin, who was a Mughal era poet. And he was there with his blue diary and this particular book with him. The park was desolate. Desolate means it was more or less deserted. No one else was there, except for a few kids, only a few kids playing on the swings in a distant corner. Other than those kids, no one else were there. Flower beds with roses and marigolds flanked the pebble paths that crisscrossed the park, with a marble bust of Jawaharlal Nehru in the center. So he's describing the park. So at the center is a marble bust. Bust is a statue, not a full-length statue, up to the chest. That is what you call a bust. So it is made of marble. And it is Jawaharlal Nehru's bust. And that is there at the center. Then there are trees. There are rose plants, marigolds. All these flowers were there, lying next to the pebbled path. There's a path, across the park, which is a pebbled path. Pebbles are there. ഉരുളൻ കല്ലുകൾ വച്ച നിറഞ്ഞ ഒരു ചെറിയ പാത. A gust of wind shook the plants and Arif felt a slight chill. So the wind made him chill. It was cold. Zipping up his wind cheater, Arif picked up the book. A wind cheater is a kind of a jacket, which is worn mostly when you ride bicycles, so that the air doesn't hit you and make you cold. He was flipping through the pages when the sound of footsteps distracted him. So someone is near him. It was an old man. An emaciated old man. Emaciated means very thin, as if he hasn't eaten for days. Very thin, emaciated old man, wrapped in a white shawl and tall. Okay, a tall old man. And next to him was a slender woman with a black sari, walked slowly in his direction. So they were coming towards where he was sitting. Her long hair was disheveled. Her long hair was disheveled means it was not properly combed. Her eyes swollen and smeared with coal. Her eyes were swollen and it was smeared with coal. നമ്മൾ കണ്ണിൽ കൺമഷി ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നവരുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ വാട്ട് ഹാപ്പൻസ്, ഇത് കരയുമ്പോൾ ഈ കൺമഷി പടരും. So that is what happened. It seemed as if she had been crying. She had been crying Arif couldn't help looking at her, so he felt bad for her, and he kept looking at her. Subhanallah, he murmured and went back to his book, and he saw her helping the elderly man settle down on a bench nearby. So they sat down. And Arif opened his diary and couldn't stop himself from scribbling two lines in Urdu about her. So Arif was enamored by this particular lady who was crying, and he immediately wrote down a couple of lines, a poem about her in Urdu. Okay, the English translation of the poem is given. Her tresses are black, and so are her robes, meaning her hair is black, and her robes, her attire, her clothes are uh, black as well. Her body is like marble. Her beauty is incomparable. Incomparable means it cannot be compared to anything else. She's so beautiful. She's very beautiful. Her face more beautiful than a full moon. So this is what he wrote in Urdu. Babuji, how are you feeling now? Okay, this is what the lady asked the old man. Arif heard the woman's voice and raised his gaze again. There was no response from the old man. So the old man was not responding to the question. She held him by his shoulders and looked around, confused and anxious. So something seemed to have happened to the old man. So she became, she started panicking. Babuji, her voice became shriller because she's panicking. With one hand, she touched his forehead and cheeks and then bent her head to place her ear on his chest. So the man has become unconscious. She started to shake him frantically, because again, she's scared, and she is panicking. So Arif decides to respond. Clutching his diary and book, Arif got up and rushed to them. Please help, she cried, trying to hold back her tears. Arif dropped his things on the bench, grabbed the old man's wrist, and searched for pulse. So Arif is trained to do such things, and he searched for a pulse in the old man's wrist. Arif understood that it was a cardiac arrest, it was a heart attack. He remembered the class they had last week about dealing with heart attacks. So he has taken a class. Arif quickly stretched him out on the ground and unbuttoned the man's shirt. And this is something which we can follow when, if at all, we are faced with such a crisis. Arif quickly stretched him out on the ground. So you need to find a flat surface, and he took the old man and made him lie down there on the flat surface, unbuttoned the man's shirt, and he knelt down beside the man and kept his hand near his nose to see if he was breathing. So there was no breath. He noticed that the man had stopped breathing. He immediately placed his right hand on the brow of the man and his left hand under his chin, and slowly opened his mouth. So he is about to give him CPR, artificial breathing. So the woman had crouched down and was removing the man's shoes. She then started rubbing his right foot. And Arif took out a tissue paper from his pocket, pierced a hole inside it, and kept over the man's mouth and carefully adjusted it so that the hole was over his mouth. So he took a tissue paper and made a hole and kept it on top of the old man's mouth, and so that he could give mouth to mouth respiration. He then lowered his mouth to touch the victim's mouth and slowly breathed in life-giving air. So he is giving artificial respiration. He waited for 30 seconds and then breathed in again. So that is the procedure. Next, he moved towards the man's chest and placed his left hand below the breast of the man and the right one on top of it. Now his hands were positioned to press down the chest of the man that would help kick-start the heart. So again, the procedure to press down on the man's chest in order to start his heart beating. Arif remembered how he used to kickstart his father's old scooter. So it's almost like kickstarting a machine. Here he is not kickstarting, he is pressing against the man's chest so that he'll start breathing and his heart would start functioning again. Before starting to push down, he looked up at the woman. She was looking at him worried. Tears had started flowing down her cheeks. Go to the park exit and see if there is a taxi parked outside, he told her. So while he is giving CPR to this man, he is asking the woman to go and find a taxi. She hesitated. Arif understood that she was worried to leave her father with him. So she was worried that she's leaving her father with a complete stranger. So Arif understood that and he said, "Don't worry, I'm trained to deal with such situations." He said, he said. Immediately she stood up, took one end of the sari and covered her head with it and ran to the park exit to find a taxi. Arif then started pushing down 2-inch deep and then relaxed the pressure. So he started pressing on the chest with both his hands and 2 inches deep, and then he relaxed his hands. So he kept on repeating this at intervals. ഇടയ്ക്കിടെ periodically ഇത് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടേയിരുന്നു. The victim started responding as he finished 30 compression depths. So around 30 times he did that, and finally the victim started responding. The man opened his eyes and he started looking around. So his heart is back beating. Don't worry, you're in safe hands. We will take you immediately to the hospital. Meanwhile, the girl rushed in with a taxi driver. Arif knew. He came to Arif's side. So she came back with a taxi driver. His name is Habib, and Arif already knew him. Habib, help me lift him. Poking his ear with his little finger. So this driver, Habib, has this mannerism of poking his finger. ചെവിയിൽ ചെറുവിരലിട്ട് കറക്കുന്ന ഒരു ശീലമുണ്ട്, a mannerism. Poking his ear with his little finger, the driver glanced nervously at the old man and the woman in black by his side before saying, "Yes, Arif bhai." So he also, he started helping Arif. The woman followed them and extended her arms to support her father's head as they laid the old man on the back seat. She accidentally brushed Arif's chest with her arms. She then got in the car and placed her father's head in her lap. So all of them, they got in the car. The old man was lying down at the back. The woman was also got in. And Arif climbed in the front and sat next to the driver. Turning to Habib, he said, "Patna Medical College and Hospital emergency ward." So that's where he wanted the driver to take them. On the way to the hospital, Arif looked in the rear view mirror inside the car. And the elderly man was still unconscious, and the woman was rubbing his palms and chest as tears rolled down her rosy cheeks. So she was still crying, and the man was unconscious again. "Ya Allah, help this old man," Arif prayed silently. Near Dak Bungalow Square, the car stopped with a jolt. So there's something going on at this particular place. The road ahead was blocked. A makeshift barricade had been created in the middle of the road using plastic chairs, bicycles, and scooters. So someone has blocked the road using a makeshift barricade. ഉള്ള സാധനം വെച്ച് ഒരു ബാരിക്കേഡ് ഉണ്ടാക്കി വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ലൈക്ക് യൂസിങ് പ്ലാസ്റ്റിക് ചെയർസ്, ബൈസിക്കിൾസ് ആൻഡ് സ്കൂട്ടേഴ്സ്. 60 to 70 young men, some of them squatting on the ground, chanted slogans in Hindi. So ഇതെന്തോ ഒരു പ്രൊട്ടസ്റ്റ് ആണ്. 60 to 70 young men were there. They were sitting on the ground, they were squatting on the ground, and they started chanting slogans in Hindi. So എന്തോ മുദ്രാവാക്യം വിളിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അവിടെ ഇരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു. Paper and cloth banners were hung on the nearby electric and telephone poles. So there were paper and cloth banners. The taxi was blocked by vehicles queued up behind their car, and they were unable to take a different route. Arif got out of the taxi and looked around. So വന്ന വഴി തിരിച്ചു പോകാൻ പറ്റില്ല, കാരണം പുറകിൽ അവരുടെ കാറിന് പുറകിൽ വേറെ വെഹിക്കിൾസ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. സോ തിരിഞ്ഞു പോകാനുള്ള ഒരു സ്ഥലം അവർക്ക് ഇല്ല. So Arif got out of the taxi. The woman had rolled down the glass and was looking outside distractedly. So she was looking at what was going on. She didn't say anything, but her brimming eyes beseeched him to get her father to the hospital somehow. So she was looking at Arif, and Arif knew that she was pleading with him to somehow, get them to the hospital. Unnerved by her tears, so he was affected by her tears. He started panicking, or he started becoming nervous. Arif desperately wanted to find a way out of there, so he became desperate. Habib bhai, we should talk to the students, Arif said to the driver. No point, Arif bhai. സംസാരിച്ചിട്ട് കാര്യമൊന്നുമില്ല. Habib was again poking his ear. He cleared his throat, rolled down the glass, stuck his head out and spat and said, "They'll not let us go." കടത്തി വിടുമെന്ന് വിചാരിക്കണ്ട. I have to face them alone. Arif stole a brief glance at the woman. So he decided to go up to them. Arif decided to go up to the students and talk to them. Should I come with you? She asked. Stay with your father. I'll talk to them, Arif said, rubbing his chin with his fingers. He was afraid of facing the protesters because he knew how far a mob of students could go in a charged situation. So he knew what would happen, because they are young men, they are angry, and it is very difficult to make them understand anything. So mustering all the courage, collecting all the courage that he has, he exhaled and began to make his way to the crowd, through the crowd to the other side. So there were a lot of people, a lot of young men, and so he went across, he went through this crowd to the other side to meet the leaders. What's the problem, mister? Don't you see the road is blocked? One of the protesters, a well-built, bearded man with a red tilak, ഒരു കുങ്കുമക്കുറിയൊക്കെ ഇട്ട് ഒരാൾ, red tilak on his forehead, rose from the ground. So one of the protesters started asking why this man is walking through the crowd. The crowd is sitting on the road. So he said, "Sir," Arif entreated. Entreated means he almost, very politely he is talking as if he is pleading and requesting. "An old man is seriously ill. Please allow us to go. He'll die if he doesn't get timely medical help." "No, it's not possible. Go away." So they said they won't allow. "Please, brother, it is a question of life and death," Arif implored. Again, he requested. താഴ്മയായി അപേക്ഷിച്ചു. "When the future of millions of youth is at stake, we don't care about an old man." So these are, these are students, youngsters. So they are saying that when the future of millions of youth is at stake, ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഭാവി തുലാസിൽ തൂങ്ങി നിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ we don't care about an old man. We don't care what happens to an old man, said a swarthy young man in a grey safari suit as he emerged from the ground. Swarthy means someone who has a dark complexion. Just go away, the bearded man said threateningly. Okay, and no, I won't, said Arif. Why? What you are doing is illegal. Arif began to get angry because these people are not letting even an old man who's ill go through. So when he got angry, suddenly a sturdy looking 20 something, 20 something means 20 something young man, jumped out of the crowd and punched Arif, who fell to the ground. So someone hit Arif and Arif fell to the ground. Abay Saleh, are you here to teach us what is legal and what is illegal? Get lost or we'll beat the shit out of you, bloody rascal. So that's what they said. Arif knew he couldn't fight alone with this mob of students. So he knew he won't stand a chance, if he is to fight alone. Other protesters had begun to surround him, and one of them held a hockey stick. There was complete silence. Arif was frightened. See, he was scared and he was confused. He didn't know what to do next. So suddenly the lady comes there. Please don't hurt him, a female voice said. Turning around, he was surprised to see the woman standing behind him with her palms folded in request. Thozhukaiyoda request the lady to let them go. Her hair was covered with the pallu of her sari and her eyes were brimming with tears. The bearded man shook his head and told his fellow protesters, let him go. So when the woman requested, they decided to let the man go, not to hurt Arif, not to let the taxi go to the hospital, but to let Arif go without being hurt. The students surrounding Arif stared at him with angry eyes. They stared at him. They looked at him with angrily, and then began to move aside, indicating that Arif could pass. So they at first surrounded him, and then they moved away. Rising from the ground, Arif looked intently at the woman. He rubbed the dust of his palms and turned to go when he heard Habib shouting and gesturing frantically towards the car. So as soon as he got up, he saw Habib calling them. He was shouting and gesturing. Gesturing means making actions or showing actions with his hands to go towards the car. Frantically means in panic. So Arif's heart sank. So when he saw Habib doing this, he thought that maybe the old man may have died. So Arif's heart sank. The woman had already started running. Arif followed her. So the old man was muttering something indecipherable. See, the old man was in a half conscious state, and he was saying something. He was muttering something which was not audible, and it was indecipherable. They couldn't understand what he was saying. It was not decipherable. They couldn't understand. Habib was fanning him with a folded newspaper. So അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് വീശി കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നു with a folded newspaper, and Arif heaved a sigh of relief. So Arif പേടിച്ചതുപോലെ അയാൾക്കൊന്നും പറ്റിയില്ല, because Habib was calling them frantically because he was trying to say something. The woman got into the car, placed her father's head in her lap, and started gently rubbing his chest and began reciting the Hanuman Chalisa. So she started, praying. She started reciting the Hanuman Chalisa. ഒരു മന്ത്രം പോലെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു song. I believe all of you know what a Hanuman Chalisa is. So the translation is given there. O son of the wind god, one with an auspicious form and destroyer of adversities. Adversities means bad things, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സങ്കടങ്ങൾ. O King of gods, may you dwell in our heart along with Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita. In a few seconds, the old man fell silent. So again, he may have lost consciousness. The woman continued with the recitation. She kept on singing the Chalisa. Arif looked around to find a way to get away, but there was none. They were trying to, get out of that particular place, but there was no way to go. They were locked in. Barely a few minutes had passed when a white ambassador car and two anti-riot police buses stopped on the other side of the road. 30 to 40 policemen emerged from the buses and moved towards the protesters. The helmeted men were armed with lathis. A senior police officer got down from the car and made announcements on a handheld loudspeaker asking the students to clear the road. So police came and they were equipped with lathis and helmets in order to drive the protesters away. So before charging at them, they started asking them to move on their own. The students responded by pelting stones at the policemen. So they started throwing stones at the policemen. Sensing trouble, Arif swiftly got into the taxi. A few stray stones fell on the ground on the crowd stuck in the traffic jam. So they were throwing stones at the policemen, and few of the stones stuck the vehicles at the front of the traffic jam. People panicked and many of them left their motorcycles and rickshaws and ran for safety. So they couldn't go anywhere with their vehicle, so they left it there and started running away. Those in cars and taxis covered. Covered means they started അകത്ത് വണ്ടിക്കകത്തിരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു, അവർ അകത്ത് തന്നെ കുനിഞ്ഞിരിക്കാൻ തുടങ്ങി. The policemen went after the protesters. Arif saw the students scatter. They were running here and there. Some fell on the road and the policemen beat them up mercilessly. ഒരു ദാക്ഷിണ്യമില്ലാതെ അവരെ അടിച്ചു before dragging them to the police van. Soon the road was cleared. Habib sped through the dark bungalow square. So they started moving. The old man was wheeled inside the hospital on a stretcher and the woman went in with him. Arif stayed to settle the taxi fare. Luckily, he had received his monthly pocket money from his father that morning. ഇപ്പോൾ കയ്യിൽ പോക്കറ്റ് മണി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത് കൊണ്ട്, ആരിഫ്സ് ഫാദർ ഈസ് എ പോലീസ്മാൻ, സോ കയ്യിൽ പോക്കറ്റ് മണി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത് കൊണ്ട് ടാക്സി ഫെയർ കൊടുക്കാൻ പറ്റി. Entering the waiting hall of the emergency ward of PMCH, Patna Medical College Hospital, Arif spotted the woman sitting in the waiting room, the loose end of her sari pressed against her mouth, probably trying to control her sobbing. കരയാതെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കരച്ചിൽ അടക്കി പിടിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് സാരി മുഖത്തോട് അമർത്തി പിടിച്ച് ഇരിക്കുന്നത് കണ്ടു. Where is your father? Arif asked as he sat down on a chair beside her. The hall smelled of Dettol and phenyl. So we all know the smell of a hospital. If at all you have been to a hospital, you all would know. A lanky middle-aged man, a thin middle-aged man, was wiping the floor with a piece of soggy cloth. So someone was there cleaning the hospital floor with a soggy cloth. Soggy means wet cloth. They have taken him for some tests, the woman said in a low voice. They asked me to wait here. She had barely finished her sentence when a sturdy man with a thick mustache came and asked her to accompany him to the ICU. സോ ICUലോട്ട് ചെല്ലാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് അവരോട് പറഞ്ഞു, അയാളുടെ കൂടെ ചെല്ലാൻ. someone came, a sturdy man. Sturdy means a well built man. And Arif also started, he also stood up to go along with her. So that is when the man said, Only one person allowed, the man said matter of factly. Matter of factly means in a normal voice. ഒരാൾ മാത്രമേ അനുവാദമുള്ളൂ. Please wait here till I return, the woman said to Arif. An hour later, the woman was back. Thank you very much for all your help. You saved my father's life. It was a heart attack, she said, her face shining with gratitude. Gratitude means നന്ദി. സഹായിച്ച ആരിഫിനോട് ഉള്ള ആ ഒരു നന്ദി അവരുടെ മുഖത്ത് റിഫ്ലക്റ്റ് ചെയ്തു. He is much better now. I am happy I could be of help, he said. He said, I'm happy that I was able to help you. So she asks, what is your name and where do you study? And Arif says that my name is Arif Khan. I'm doing my BSc honors from AN College. He thought of asking her name as well, but checked himself. He wanted to ask the lady's name, but then he checked himself. Checked himself means he did not. He thought about it once again. It was impolite to ask a woman's name if she was older than you. So he considered it, impolite. It is not a very polite thing to ask the name of a lady if she was older than you. He felt it was now time to leave her. So he understood that now it is now time to leave her. So that is the story. Thank you.